Jambo. Now that's Swahili, okay? How are you? Good afternoon. Last week I spoke in Yoruba, so I'm going to try to do that with a different language all the time. Um, I hope everyone can hear me. I'm going to speak as loud as I can. You can hear me? All right, that's great. The My wife, who's a geographer, has just called my attention to an error on that map. My grandson, Jabari, have been doing my PowerPoint. He's not a geographer. So one country is left out there, South Sudan. When this map was made, they were not fighting. It was one Sudan. So I just want to correct that. Before we move on to the subject of today, let me take a moment to just review what I think we did last week. We tried to select some keywords that will allow us to understand African history and its people. So we call that definition of terms, including definition of Africa itself and its most ancient name, Al-Kobana. There are many other words we defined that I think will be helpful in understanding African history, past and present. Then I try to provide you with what I call African history at a glance. All of this is within 1 hour. Try to provide you some information about space in Africa, the land, about 12 million square miles, its people, its cultures, very diverse, its religion. We also talked about the ancient empires and kingdoms of Africa, Genesis, civilization, what they did, what they accomplished, the rise and fall of those kingdoms and empires. And I think lastly, I tried to provide you with some major historical movements that have impacted Africa. That's what I think we did last week. I also observed last week, as we move forward today, that there were many people who have been to Africa, who have perhaps more vast experience traveling different places in Africa that I never went to. I always look for the library and the rest of them, but eat their food, wear their clothes. This is Ghanaian attire. And so what I want to do at the Q&A session is to engage some of you who have been to Africa to take at least 1 minute or two to tell us your experience in Africa. I think it'll be useful. I just got these 3 books from a lady who have been to Africa many times and her daughter. For example, this book, Chinua Achebe, and some other books. So we have some people here who have the background, the history, and I'd like you to share that with us as we move forward in this course. Our focus today is what I call African history and historiography of African thought and philosophy, or philosophy. History and historiography of African philosophy or African thought. This subject allows us to go back to the very origin of human beings. To trace the history of African thought, you have to go there. It didn't start yesterday. There's so much we know about the past, and there's also so much we don't know. So I'm going to talk about what we do know. We do know by estimates, the archaeologists, anthropologists, and many other disciplines, that our sensorial origin, our ancestors, were on Earth for more than 6 million years. Chimpanzee, apes. This is about the evolutionary process. There are only two ways I think you can explain human existence on Earth. Either through the scientific evolutionary process or what we call creationism, which is biblical literature. The story about the Garden of Eden. But let's use the scientific evolutionary process that are estimated about 6 million years. Some kind of thing was on Earth. It says chimpanzee, then it started to evolve into Homo sapien. The archaic Homo sapien is estimated to be at least 300,000 years. And the modern Homo sapien, about 160,000 years. Homo sapien, what does it mean in Latin? The wise man. Homo sapien means the wise man in Latin. So I asked myself, these people have been here for more than 160,000 years. If they were wise men, that's what they call it, they must have some thought. They must have done some thinking. But can we trace the history of this thought? Not yet. But we can assume that if this is the origin of human thought, we have to begin there. So what I want to do now is to try to go this process and see whether we can understand a better understanding of the genesis of African thought. What the study of Africa promised for us is a better understanding of the human race, where we come from, what has happened to us, and then understand also the history of migration. Homo sapien moved to all parts of the world in different shapes, different colors. Because people keep on asking the question, come up with this color line. Where am I white? Where am I black? Where am I brown? The color line is a subject of just barely 17th century. And people have been here for thousands of years before that. So let's take a look what we have here. Maybe I need to hold this. Can you hear me? Yeah, I can walk around with this stuff. Here's where we are. I'm trying to give you a background. What I did last week was a context. To understand African thought, African philosophy, you got to do it within the context. Cultural context, environmental context. If you look at African thought from its very, very beginning, I've selected at least 5 areas in which their writings and their thinking, their symbolism, the way they communicate, we cover these 5 areas. One, the notion of spirituality. Remember now, they are trying to create really a better understanding of the nature of the universe. They also wanted to create a better understanding of the nature of human beings. Generally, the third one is human beings' relationship with their gods. So you can talk about spirituality. Along with that is the notion of morality. As we begin our case study next week, you will find some philosophers, some thinkers who occupy that. That's all they did. It's about spirituality. In Mbité's book, for example, African Religion, it's all about spirituality. John Mbité from Kenya. So the next one is about politics. The notion of freedom is somewhat inherent in human beings. It goes with nationalism. You will see through African thought a lot of thinkers who specialize in that field. They don't have to have a PhD in philosophy. They were thinkers. Some of them were philosophers in the modern term of philosophy. The discipline itself is very, very young. So we also have others who focus on cultural identity. Who am I? Cultural identity may have something to do with gender nowadays also, not just color, not just male or female, or every other things in between. Okay? Cultural identity. Identity politics. All of that, you will find some of this writing. This is just where they are. The notion of decolonization. Okay? And I think you will find also a lot of African thinkers who have specialized in this notion of decolonization, and they argue. This is about epistemology, about knowledge. They will argue that you can't get that unless you really get into the indigenous languages. Okay? There are a lot of thinkers in this whole area. And then, fifth, last but not the least, is globalization and nation building. What thinkers have been created as a result of globalization? Or the notion of national building after independence. So you find thinkers in this area. These are the broad 5 areas I think you can find some of the thinkers we are going to be talking about next week. We talk about this notion of ancient and medieval and the rest of them. I don't think I gave you the dates for all of these. It's a part of the notion of pluralization. What is ancient history? I already told you where I stand about prehistory. There's no such thing. What is ancient history? Well, usually historians will think it's about 3000 BC to about 500 AD. Okay? And then medieval or Middle Ages from 500 AD to 1500 CE, Common Era. Modern history usually is from about 1500 to 1945. It's not surprising. These are all Western periodization. We created the United Nations in 1945, so that must be the end of modern history, beginning of modern history. Okay? Then we talk about contemporary history, will be since 1945 to the present. I think somebody asked me about these dates, but these dates are based upon Western periodization, Western timeline. There are other timelines that are in Asia or other places that we are not talking about, but that's the context. Okay? All right. Let's move on. There have been arguments. How do people communicate their thoughts? Anoy Toynbee, supposed to be one of the greatest British historians, he wrote 7 volumes about the study of history. And he concluded, he never found anywhere in human history where Africans have ever made any kind of contribution. That's Anoy Toynbee. There are many other scholars like that who wrote about that. They said Africa was primitive, the Christian movement, we are going there to civilize them. Africa is a dark continent. All these are notions about Africa. So what I'm trying to do here then is to demonstrate. Scholars have demonstrated. I didn't do all this research. I just get them out. That indeed, the notion of language existed even before you was born. We used to think that the oldest form of writing, what we call African systems of writing, you can Google it, they will all jump on your face. These are available now. When I was in graduate school, we didn't know anything about this. Okay? So the study is ongoing. It's not over yet. We used to think that hieroglyphics was the oldest form of writing in Africa. That's not true anymore. Now we find out Gayaz is probably older in the old Nubian region, which is modern day Sudan. In fact, I talked to somebody not long ago in Addis. They are teaching Gayaz as we speak. It's still a written language in Ethiopia. When I was there, I tried to study some Amharic. I never knew they had Gayaz. Okay, but it's there. Now, Umbasidi, I just list all these things there, languages in which they are communicating their ideas, their thoughts. The Proto-Sudan Saharan is the one you are suggesting that's probably older than almost any other language over there. Mende, where we are all familiar with Mende, that's Liberia. Speaking there, but the native. Wolof, good history. Senegal, everybody in Florida should know about Wolof. The kingdom of Wolof. That's where Kingsley found the love of his life, bought his little girl, and brought her in as his slave. I don't know whether I've gone to the Kingsley plantation right here in Florida. That's a long story. He got married. They have 4 children. He escaped to Haiti because at that time, it was no. There was no such interracial relationship. So brought her as a little girl, she was only 13, from a Wolof kingdom. And lo and behold, somehow, between Senegal and the Caribbean, she was pregnant. He decided to marry her. It's a long story. Because after the man died, I'm saying it because it's Florida history. His family sued her. You cannot have all this wealth. After all, you were a slave. And then she took them to court. Here is my document. We are married. She won the case. It's estimated at that time she was probably the richest woman in Florida history. Now, I got connected with the great-great-great-great-grandkids when I was researching Kingsley, who decided to go back into Senegal to find out where their great-great-great-great-mother came from. So that's a long list. It connects with Florida. That's why I'm taking time to explain this. But that's Wolof, very widely spoken, came out of the kingdom, Wolof. In Sierra Leone, there is spoken. It's the language that actually discovered somebody from Liberia, but it became the language of people in Sierra Leone. You know the history of Sierra Leone. It is the first attempt after the abolition of slave trade by the British Parliament in 1807. They decided to return free slaves back to Africa. Sierra Leone then was colonized as a place of people who were free. We follow the same thing here after the abolition of slave trade on paper in 1808 in the United States, we decided with Firestone Industry to find Liberia. Okay, so those are two areas that we need to understand in the context of all of this. I told my grandson to make sure he put a label in all these systems of writing. Okay, this is how they communicate their thoughts in writing and in speaking. So they do exist. Yes, please.
What is the Ghana language? What are they talking about? Is that the way they write every day? So it's like Chinese. They have pictures. Uh-huh.
You can Google all of this and bring it to the class so we can talk about it. It's still spoken language today. Some people think that some of these languages are dead. No, they are not. That it's still being taught. A lot of people live here and go and study anthropologists and archaeologists. There are some more. All right. My wife is going to say, you always talk about semiology. There are many ways that these people communicated, not only in written language or script, but also in symbols. And that has been my challenge to African studies everywhere I've been to. We have neglected a very important way of communicating, semiology, the study of signs. Here are some signs. Okay? They also communicated not only to symbols, oral tradition. And you will recall very early on in the study of Africa, even at the University of London, they argued Africa has no history because it has no writing system. They condemned oral history, that oral history is not history. Believe it or not, oral history today is the biggest portion of human history. We have come around. So they did communicate in oral history. They also communicated in proverbs. A colleague of mine written a book on African proverbs. I was going to bring it so I can read some proverbs for you. That's how they also communicated. Now I recall one of them says, don't call the hand that feeds you. It's an African proverb. You'd be stupid to call the hand that feeds you. You just don't do that. Okay. So there are many proverbs and that he communicated with, in addition to all of this. This is just a background to what we are going to start doing next week, to look at some case studies of all these thinkers. What way were they communicating? Were they effective? Yes, ma'am.
Drums.
Yes. Yes. We got to music. No doubt about it. Drums. In fact, in the plantation system, they were a part of the slave code was thou shalt not beat your drum, because the drums were communicating with people how to escape and when to escape. Yeah. We use drum also to assemble in the community. When you start beating the drum, you know the language of the drum, and you know the rhythm, you know how to dance to the drum. The chief, they are keep in the palace, drum is going on, you know you got to come over. And I remember when I was in Addis, even at Selassie, in modern times, you go to the palace, it's a drum to welcome everyone coming to the palace. So music has been very, very essential. Thank you. Yeah.
I didn't see any of the East Africa languages other than Ethiopia.
All right. Hold on. She didn't see any of that. Let me see. Now I'm talking about ancient language now. You know, when I go for that, then I'm talking here about the colonizing languages. Then you went too fast. Here you go. Okay? She made me do it, okay? She couldn't wait. We are friends. Yeah, it was Swahili. That's why you were not here when I greeted everybody when I said Jambo. You were not here. Better come on time. Okay, this is where I was going to end, okay? Well, let me go back. All right. Here is something, unless you are a philosopher, it's very difficult to understand this. This is what I call post-colonial systemic era. Post-colonial, after colonization. The notion of systemic philosophy. Yeah, the notion of systemic philosophy is a group of philosophers who believe that everything on earth has a system. That's their philosophical thinking. And therefore, if you want to impact a society, a community, you got to belong to a system or create a system. Okay? There were a lot of African thinkers in the post-colonial era who were trained in Western philosophy. I would argue most of African thinkers were trained in the West because the West colonized all of them. Whether it is English or French or German or whatever it is. They went over there and they studied. They knew almost everything about Socrates, everything about, Plato. So post-colonial era then generated a new form of thinking in Africa. And in that form, here are the languages they used in writing. I just showed you Ashenu Achebe's book. He's an Igbo man. He didn't write in Igbo. He was writing in English because he was well educated in England. That's how they taught us. So they write very well. In French, same thing. Just like Diop, we're going to talk about him next week as a case study. Anta Diop from Senegal, they write very well. Aimé Césaire, all of those people wrote very, very well in French. In fact, some of them were writing better than French people. They went to Sorbonne, and you had to be a citizen to get a degree from Sorbonne in those days. I think they have changed. Okay. So, in Portuguese, in Dutch language, in German, and now social media. They moved from all of that now social media platform in their writing of their thoughts. Now, finally, the indigenous languages, what I call modern and contemporary. This is nowadays Swahili. There has been a long debate by intellectuals from East Africa that Africans are going to be excellent in science and everything else if only you can teach them in their own mother tongue. Some of them say it's Swahili. Arguably, Swahili, and I'm not an anthropologist, has never been an indigenous African language. Okay? It's a combination of this and that and that. It became Swahili. And so you have this school of thought in the post-colonial era. Yoruba, one of the great thinkers, was also captured and was saved by the British. He became a theologian. We study his thinking. He's the one who actually got the Bible, transcribed it into Yoruba language, the entire Bible. We study his case in the next 2 weeks. Hausa, which is very, very close to Arabic, you find them in the northern part of almost every country. Nigeria has the largest number of Hausa people. They are historically Muslims. Okay, they have that connection all the way through northern Ghana and the rest of them, even Senegal. They are there. They are writing in those languages. The Creole language, the Creole, Crow is not really speaking, it's not really spoken in America and Louisiana. You have Crow. A lot of Francophone countries, you have Crow languages that they speak and write. You have Igbo or Igbo. Depends on what spelling. This is the real traditional spelling, Igbo. The Igbo are from the eastern part of Nigeria. Well, people used to call them Biafra during the Nigerian Civil War, if you remember that. Then you have, of course, Amharic from Ethiopia. It's still there. I was very excited about Amharic when I got there. They had, this was in late 1950s. They had a typewriter, they had everything. I said, we in West Africa, we are called out by the British. We were told we have no language. We have to use British typewriters. But when I go to Addis, they had their own typewriters in Amharic. I was shocked, but it was very, very exciting to me. It was new. I thought I was somewhere else. So you have, of course, Akan, very widely spoken, even by the ancient places in the old Ghana, Gold Coast time. So Akan is still very well spoken. I think I think they offer a course in Akan language also, and many other African languages. Arabic, people don't want to hear this, but it's very important that Arabic is actually an intellectual language. I remember spending time in Morocco, brought a lot of literature to the University of Ghana. And they told me, oh, we don't have people doing research in Arabic. I said, shut up. Just keep it in the archive. I said, just put it in the archive. Scholars are going to come to look at that language. Arabic is a very, very an intellectual language. And it's not true to say that everybody who speaks Arabic is automatically a Muslim. That's not true. I have many friends who speak Arabic very, very well, came from that background, who are also Christians or that kind of religion. So Arabic is very essential in understanding African thought, right from ancient time to the present time. I can think about, for example, we'll talk about it next week. I can think about my favorite, King Mansa Musa of Mali, who was supposed one of the richest men in the world at this time. When he was taking pilgrimages into Mecca, he was giving away gold as if it was nothing. That's how rich he was. Okay? So that kind of cultural relationship between Africa itself and people from the Arab world who may have been speaking Arabic is very interconnected. Lastly, not lastly, pidgin English. What we call pidgin English. Huh? Are they come? Are they come is pidgin. What does that mean? I'm coming. Are they come? I'm coming. Oh, okay. Mama, come, if we go. Say, Mama, come and let us go. They have taken English and make it an indigenous language. If anywhere in Africa, I would argue, pidgin English is probably mostly spoken by more people than any other African language, especially in the marketplaces. They communicate very effectively. I think in Nigeria now, they are broadcasting on television now in pidgin English. You know, they just realized that the English, the Oxford English just cannot reach all these people in the millions. So now pidgin English, I think my alma mater teaches pidgin English, Michigan State. They knew that many years ago, that this was going to be almost a lingua franca, common language. You don't like to speak Kro. Now they are putting it into writing form. So pidgin English is very widely spoken in West Africa in particular. Zulu. That's another very important language of communication, especially in Southern Africa. Now, that's all I want to say today about, what's going on? Yeah. Go to where I started. Okay. Yeah, okay. This is fine. Let's just stay that way. I'm going to start with questions and answers. Then I'm going to ask those of you who have been to Africa. Maybe we can take 5 of you today. Take a minute or two and tell us your experiences in Africa. Is that okay? I'm going to do it anyway. So, okay. I'm going to make this one Q&A. We got about at least 20 more minutes to go. Yeah, no. Which language do I speak? All right. Next time, I'll make sure I bring you my memoir. I was born into 2 tribes in the Delta region of Nigeria. My father was Urobo. My mother was Ishekri. Those 2 tribes never got along. Never. Somehow they were in love, they got married. They decided in Sapele area, this is Delta region. They decided to get the hell out of the place. I went to Benin City. Not the country Benin, but Benin City, one of the Asian kingdoms. That's where we were all born. I was born in Benin. My late brother was born in Benin. My late junior sister was born in Benin. And my older sister, I'm the only one living. And we have to learn where we're born to speak Edo, which is the language of people from Benin. Edo. I can say Ekwaya, which means good afternoon. Now, I moved from there. My father died when I was just like this. My mama raised us. What language do you think she raised us in? In her language, in Ishekri. So I speak Ishekri. I left there. I wanted to go to school. I competed. I went to Yaba Higher College in Lagos, which was a Yoruba land. I had to learn Yoruba. Okay. Now, I'm still doing English now. English is supposed to be from the very day you were born, you do the English. There's no question about that. Whether it's in the church or whether I was born as an Anglican. My mama was a Baptist. But we split it. My brother was Anglican. My mama and my sister, they were all Baptist. Okay? So right there, 3 languages of Africa. I went to Ethiopia. I tried to learn Amharic. I was there for 1 year, then I got out. So that's the story. Now, I worked with people who worked for my mother on a plantation of rubber. They were all Igbo. So I grew up with Igbo people. And I pick up a lot of Igbo language also. I tried to learn Arabic from academic work. And it's gone. Yeah. Any other question?
Any other questions?
All right. Oh,
I found that in the 5 African regions, of course, there are quite a bit of common denominators, but culturally speaking, there are also quite a few differences. What do you think it makes what's the main factor for this situation? Yes.
the question is, Africa is divided into 5 regions. That's UN. North, South, East, West, and Central. There is a 6th one, the African diaspora. Those are 6 regions now outside Africa. The question is that there are different cultures in each of these regions. How did that come about? Wow. Yes, there is what I call distinctiveness in African cultures. Distinctiveness, very distinctive. There's also what I call universality in African cultures. Universality cuts across all cultures. The distinctiveness is located in that particular community or in that tribal tradition. Now, if you look at 5 or 6 tribes, they are never the same. They may speak the same language, but there are nuances to that language. They are dialects. Or I speak Shekri. There are Shekri from Koko. They are different from Shekri from Wari. They are dialects. Even though we come from the same tribe, we call it Shekri people. So how do you explain these differences? Well, that's going to get to how do we explain the difference between the South in the United States and Kansas? How do you explain the difference between New Yorkers and Southerners? Same history. Human beings have choices to make. Good, bad, ugly, beautiful, and whatever. But there's just common line in there that brings them together, not only as Africans, but as human beings. Not only as Americans, not only as Republicans or Democrats, but first, as human beings. When we come to realize the common ground, the commonality among human beings, we have a better world. Some cultures are judged by the skin of your color. I mean, by the color of your skin. Some are judged by your height. Some are judged by your gender. That's the root of culture. People are making choices. Then we become anti anybody else who's not like us. We create our own culture. Some of these cultures are very destructive. The culture of war. We have seen World War I, World War II. We know what they have done. But guess what? Historians have no job because nobody listens to us. We never learn from history. We do the same thing all over and over again. What did that philosopher say? You do the same thing over again and you're expecting what? Different results? It's a definition of what? Stupidity. Okay. So I can only explain to you in terms of human behavior. There are also geographical impact. Okay? Geography has a lot to do. Space with human behavior. Religion. People. Yes. By the British. Yes. Yes. The question is, countries that are colonized by the French, they seem to have a different culture. By the British, the same thing. The Portuguese, the same thing. A part of human culture is the language we speak. Remember that. That's number one. When I went to Brazil, I had to learn how to speak some Portuguese so I can negotiate my way in restaurants. Language is critical. The clothes you wear are critical. The food you wear and the music you play. These are, to me, are very critical elements of human culture. You know, I might walk to this room, I'm hearing some music with good rhythm. I don't know anybody here. If that is my culture, I will easily begin to relate to it. That's just human being. Now, the British came with their culture. All they knew. I don't blame them. Someone wrote a book about how Europeans destroyed Africa. Maybe so. But all they brought in colonization process is all they knew in their culture. And they thought that was superior. Look at it. Look at the 13 colonies. The British always thought they are superior to everybody else. It's not new. They still look at us today as inferior Americans. We can't spell. We can't speak English. They still do that. Every time I go to UK, I hear that all the time. Because we create our own spelling system, we want our freedom. We don't want to be like British. That's culture. Culture is very powerful. I think somebody, an apologist, I forgot who said that. Human behaviors are controlled by culture. The way we behave, they are reflections of our culture. Our values is a part of culture.
German colonizers who did not, I understand, they did not allow the people to go to school in Africa, opposed to the French who did allow in many instances, perhaps not always, allow them to go to school. These two different scenarios, the people, I'm sure they were affected, their mentality or their perspective of the world.
Well, we hear what she's saying. The Germans, for example, did not allow Africans to go to school, whereas the British did or the French did. But should I say this or not? For the same reason that human beings who were enslaved were not allowed to learn how to read. We're not allowed to learn how to write. If they were caught writing, Paul Frederick Douglass, he made it out. They kill you. Because they want to keep you ignorant. It's the same reason. Yes, if you look, there's somebody I just finished writing his biography, James Agri from the Gold Coast. Why do we resent educating women? I will give you an answer. Why do we have the women's suffrage, Seneca Conference, 1848? Because somebody decided that we don't keep women where they belong. And where they belong is defined by the kitchen and having babies. It's a part of human stupidity and ignorance and greed. Suppression. It has always happened in human history. You suppress some people. How do you think African kingdoms, they rose and fell? The same thing. Look at the wars in Europe. Can you conceive of any idea in 2024 that there was 100 years war between the French and the British? 100 years war, 30 years war, Wars of the Roses. People were just crazy. For what? Greed. What's the fight now in Africa? Natural resources. There's nothing about it. The land, even Chinese, are there. That is a part of human greed. Okay? I don't think we're ever created to be perfect. We have a lot of pitfalls, a lot of problems as human beings. We really discriminate against each other. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. I probably missed some of what you've been saying, but while I think everybody could agree that cultural differences are very, very important to determining the kinds of lives we live and who we are and so on, I'm looking, or I'd like to ask you, could you give us some examples of how different languages, or being a person who grew up speaking one African language as distinguished from a different African language, how has that changed or influenced the philosophy? Because that's what this class is about. And I could have missed it, but I haven't. Could you just give a couple of examples which demonstrate a link? But maybe there isn't any link because of the African diaspora, or perhaps it, anyway, can you say something about that? I'm sorry, my question isn't very focused.
Yeah, that's a very good question. That's why I'm going through all of these. I'm still paving the ground for you a context in which we can better understand African thinkers. All these are contextual. That's the context, the language, the environment, colonization, post-colonization. People have to write about what they know about what affect them or what affect their society. Okay? In all human history, even the so-called Greek philosophers, every now and then they ran to Egypt and got some ideas. But generally, they were writing about things that were confronted in Greece. That's the environment we live in. That is the function of philosophers, to create a better understanding of the universe and humankind. And it's a tough order. Even humankind with their own gods, because there are many gods. The god of the Nile, god of the sea, before this monolithic God, one God. Okay? So this is the context. And every society you go to, you find to be very true. Chinese write about their own thoughts based upon their own experiences. Some of them are being globalized. That's why I talk about the impact of globalization. That's a new kind of literature. People are beginning to feel that, am I part of a bigger world? And they are writing about it. They are thinking about it. That's the thought. That's what it's all about. All right, I promise I want to get somebody. What's the time now? Somebody who has been to Africa. Take about a minute and share your experience. Somebody. I know you have.
Well, I was in South Africa 2 times, and my husband was there 4 times. We were in Zimbabwe, and that was a beautiful country. And we were in Namibia, and we loved Namibia because it's so highly unusual. When we flew into this country, Africa, we saw all the dunes from the airport, from the airplane. And I thought, gosh, this is another world. It's another, another totally country earth. So anyway, my husband went to Johannesburg to the University of, oh, I forget the name right now. Anyway, then he went down to, I'm forgetting names now, that's bad, to Cape Town,
Yes.
and he gave, at the university, he gave lectures there. And then we went up to the mountain, the Cape, what is it now? Yeah,
Yeah.
anyway, Table Mountain, yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
And when we were up there, it was wonderful. We could see quite far. We also saw the island where Mandela was imprisoned. Mhm. But
So
then
let me
we-
ask you,
then
what were some of your expectations before you got there into Africa?
what was my husband's occupation?
Your expectations.
Civil engineer.
What did you expect? What did you expect before you got to Africa? What were you thinking about Africa before you got there?
Oh, I don't understand. Can you tell me? Oh, gosh, yeah, we were happy to see it. It's a beautiful country. People were all very nice. But when you went shopping, all the people behind the counter and doing the money,
Yes.
they were African, and the English spoke English, but the natives spoke 34 different languages.
Right.
So that was so amazing.
Yes. Thank you so much. Thank you. I think you still have a daughter in Africa working. You have a daughter working in South Africa? Yeah. Oh, yes, your daughter.
I walked all through Johannesburg
Okay.
by myself, and in Cape Town, I took the train, and I was the only white person on there,
Right.
on that flight. So
Welcome aboard.
everybody looked at me, but I was
Who is
fine.
this? That's the way I feel most of the time when I go to Europe. I'm the only dark face there. Anybody else have been to Africa can share with us? Okay.
How long have you been in the United States? Just
Okay. I always make a joke of this. I was born in Nigeria, but I was never a Nigerian. I came to this country with a British passport. I was a British subject. 1960. To Bethune-Cookman College as a fellow, as a scholar.
I have a hard time understanding.
Yeah. Yeah, 1960. That's when I came to this country. Nigeria got independence in October. I was here in the fall. I started school.
Have you traveled much in Africa?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Almost everywhere. South Africa, North Africa. I spent some time in Morocco. I spent some time in Ethiopia, West Africa,
Oh.
Central Africa, Botswana. Yeah, I was traveling around doing research.
So what is your profession? Are you a professor?
I'm a historian. I used to be a professor. I'm retired now.
Historian?
Thank God. I'm retired. I'm retired, but I'm not quite retired. You can never retire from doing research. Is there anybody else been to Africa who want to share with us? Is it you? Did I see your hand? You been to Africa? I forgot. I'm just kidding.
Just a few things. When I went with my family to work and live in Cameroon, I was so pleasantly surprised to feel at home. I have to say, I was born and raised in South America, in Colombia. So to find,
I'm sorry they lost the game yesterday.
I know, I'm still crying. I'm still about it. I'm still sick about that. Oh, but anyway, thinking about better things, um, I feel at home. The the culture is so highly collectivistic. It's not about you or mine or me, but it's about us. It's about the extended family, very extended family, about the tribe. It's about the community and the hospitality in Africa, because I have worked in different countries in Africa. Everywhere I found an incredible amount of hospitality, and even within the families, so someone who may have only one mango to eat, they wash the mango and they offer it to you as a gift. I could go on, but
Yeah. Well, we will talk about some philosophers who specialize in the concept of I am because you are. We are together. I'm nobody without you. That's another philosophy thinking. Ubuntu. Yeah. Okay.
Hi, my name's Carol Foss, and I'm a retired librarian, and I don't live here, but I wish I did. Oh, sure.
Yeah.
For most of the last 8 years, my daughter has lived and worked in Africa. She landed in Guinea this morning, and we went to visit her for about a month when she was in Peace Corps in Zambia a few years ago. So after last week's class, I went home, and as a retired librarian, I look around my house and I think, why do I have so many books? Well, this is why. I pulled the 3 thinnest books off the Africa section, which I'd be happy to lend people if they will return them in the next 2 weeks. Chinua Achebe's Girls at War, a collection of his short stories about the process of, becoming free from the British. And, so this takes place during decolonization. This North of South is basically a travelogue from the 1970s through countries who had been like 10 or 20 years past colonial rule and things that were happening then. And then this book, which I thought was really the most interesting, The River Between, takes place about 100 years ago, or 125 years ago, in a valley in Kenya, and there's a struggle with the people in the valley, some of whom want to maintain their traditional tribal affiliations and practices, some of whom are become Christians and really want to assimilate with the British and are moving into administrative positions with the British government, and then some of whom become Christians but want to maintain their traditional affiliations. Now, all 3 groups of people in this valley just can't stand each other. And a man from one group falls in love with a woman from another group, which causes a great upheaval, kind of like your parents. I'm sure everybody was very upset about them falling in love. But if anybody would like to read these books, I'd be happy to lend them to you for the next couple weeks. They're really terrific. And they're short. I picked the thinnest books off my shelf. But when my husband and my niece and I went over to Zambia to visit our daughter, she was living in, it was miles from electricity, and she was the only white person for, I don't know, 30 miles maybe. And we were expected to sponsor a feast, and so we had sent money over so they could get a pig and a goat, whatever. And so there were 200 people in her village, but the headman had generously invited the headmen from other villages, and 500 people showed up for dinner. And you know, there was no electricity, so all night long we could see through this village that there were fires and women cooking big Harry Potter cauldrons of, corn. And everybody got something to eat. Everybody got some meat, and everybody got some vegetables. And the children put on a dance for us. And we made not I, but the women made donuts sprinkled with sugar. And the dancing kids could get the donuts with the sugar on, and the other kids had to wait to see if there were any left over. And I was so pleasantly surprised at how honest the kids were, because I was going around offering them donuts, and they would say, but I did not dance. But my sister, she danced. She gets a donut. And of course, they were speaking Chichue, of which I could say 3 things: Mulabanje, which is pleased to meet you, and then a couple of other things like thank you. And but then we traveled down to Zimbabwe, which you cross the bridge from Zambia into Zimbabwe. It's like night and day. It lets you know exactly what a difference an honest government makes. Zambia only has 15 million people and a lot of water. So you don't see people just starving by the side of the road like you do in Zambia. Then we went over to Botswana, which is a really, really pleasant place, also blessed with a history of good government. And there's a wonderful movie that you can read about the Botswanan independence called A United Kingdom. And it was about the young, Crown Prince of Botswana went over to England to get an education, married an English woman, and came back to Botswana. But he had to renounce any claim to the crown as part of the deal of being allowed to go home. And he became the first elected president of Botswana, and his son became the 4th elected president. And it's just a wonderful, wonderful story. As part of the deal he made with the British, he kept the mineral rights. And this was shortly before all these diamonds were found. So the country is really a pleasant, prosperous place. Then we went over to, we went to 5 different places. We're in Malawi, we were in South Africa. And South Africa is the thing that shocked me. Okay, Cape Town, just like California, beautiful, ocean, lots of restaurants. You go over the mountain, Table Mountain, and every afternoon the clouds come in. They call it the tablecloth. The clouds cover the mountain. Then you're on the side of the mountain where all the servants live in essentially metal shipping containers with satellite dishes, TV satellite dishes on the roofs. And so they charge their neighbors to come over and watch, soccer games and stuff. And what was playing was Keeping Up with the Kardashians. And I was horrified. I was just horrified. The worst people in America are being broadcast all over South Africa. But then you get, past that, and you get into the wine country, which is just gorgeous. That was where the Germans were running things. Anyway, my daughter's over there now. She works with Mother Child Nutrition Projects for a project called the Demographic Health Inventory, and it's in 30 countries in Africa and Asia. What she's doing this month is teaching agriculture extension agents and community health workers how to do these surveys of children's health, which involves taking a little blood sample from children aged birth to 5 to see if they have hepatitis, malaria, HIV, so that they can plan for, raising healthy kids. And this is happening in 30 countries. But she's an economist and a statistician, so her job is to teach the people who are doing the surveys to fill out the forms properly so that she can analyze this and write a report so the money will keep coming in. It's partly funded by World Bank, USAID. There's a lot of different funders involved with this, but it's all over the world. And I'm extremely proud of her. She's, a wonderful human being. And I've known Marta for like 30 years. Marta is one of my most brilliant and intrepid friends.
Dr. Gordon, I think somebody on Zoom here wanted to talk to you. Where's she at? Asked him. Janice, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, ask your question.
Oh, I was just going to comment. We've visited Morocco, Egypt, and Tanzania, and each country is different and they're unique. And part of it's because of their ancient history, and it's also the geography of the countries. And they all did have influence of colonization, but the influence of the Muslims on both the Morocco and Egypt was seen quite a bit on their attitude towards women. And both of these, and all three countries, even though we were in bubbles of seeing the land and the people and interacting with them, the security was very, very tight. In Morocco, that was our first one. That was pre 9/11. Our keeper did allow us to go out and explore by ourselves. But by the time we got to Egypt, we had the steely-eyed guards with us that had the guns hidden. And then in Tanzania, because we were pretty much on safari, I would say you interacted with the people, but again, the security was very, very tight. But what was common between all three of them was you had all the kids chasing you, want you to buy stuff, and they expect you to barter. And that was kind of a shock, because usually when someone asks me to pay $2, I pay $2, but you're expected to come back with $1 or whatever. But I loved all the countries. I'd go back to Africa in a heartbeat. It is just so hard to get there.
Thank you. Well, that's the end today. Let me suggest next week we will start with case studies. I gave you a list of at least 25 on continental Africa case studies. Out of that, I selected maybe 7. I hope we can cover 3 or 5 of them. The following week, we do case studies on the diaspora, that connection between Africa and the rest of the world. I also gave you about 19 cases there, thinkers. These are people that I've decided to select because they have great impact, not only in their country, in their thinking, as well in the global context. So there's a criteria I use in selecting them, but I will argue there are many other hundreds and hundreds of African thinkers or philosophers. Those who have a degree in philosophy, or those who are just leaders, but who were thinkers. So with that, if you want to do some assignment work, look at any of those names and see which one you want to discuss. Have a great afternoon.